welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Drunk Bible Study Bonus Edition, the episode where we get to nerd out some more on the things that we read in today's episode. So today we're going to be looking at who this Daniel character is that's mentioned along...
Danel?
Oh, yeah, Danel.
Yeah.
Danel/Daniel. We're going to talk about either possibility.
Okay.
Who's mentioned alongside Noah and Job in terms of like these very honorable men.
Yeah.
We're also going to be looking at these elbow pillows, trying to get to the bottom of what that's all about. And then, Dedeker, what did you look into again?
I looked into whitewashing, like actual whitewashing, not the practice of casting white people
Right.
in a role that's not supposed to be a white person.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's not fun.
Mm-mm.
We don't like that.
Right. This is a show about fun.
Uh-huh.
So why don't I start us off? So this is a little bit
Please.
academic and nerdy here. But basically, from what I was able to find, I've found 3 potential options for who this Daniel is.
Oh,
So
okay.
the first option that we'll talk about is it Daniel? Is it actually Daniel of the book of Daniel fame?
Can you remind me who this Daniel is? Like, is he a prophet? Is he just a dude? Like, what's happening here?
I'd say he's a prophet. We haven't gotten to him yet, though.
Okay.
So that's why, so you're off the hook. You didn't forget about him.
No.
We just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
I would say his stories and his book is probably one of the more told to children stories, actually.
Really? Huh.
So I'm curious when we get there if you find that you've heard any of those stories, but definitely a lot of his stories have been portrayed and told to me as a kid, as opposed to, Ezekiel, who was not ever told to me as a kid.
No, not as much. Not as much.
Well, clearly, given
Yeah.
all of this.
So, okay. So the first possibility, and this seems to be the one that on Hermeneutic Stack Exchange was the one that got the most traction. And a number of people agreed with this and kind of got the most upvoted. And this is the argument that this is Daniel. This is that Daniel. And basically they talk about timeline-wise so this is a little bit of spoilers, but not really. And it's basically that Daniel, was a Jew, but who had been captured by King Nebuchadnezzar. And so his whole story takes place in captivity in King Nebuchadnezzar's court, essentially. Sort of like a Joseph getting captured by Pharaoh kind of a story, right? And that happened supposedly around 605 BC. And the book of Ezekiel would have been happening in like 580-something BC. So there was enough time that Daniel would have, he was still youngish, but could have had a reputation by then because he had kind of made a splash right when he arrived and was interpreting dreams and all that sort of classic old school prophet stuff. So that's one argument. It's basically saying, yeah, this could actually be him. And actually there's some evidence to suggest that. Now, something that's brought up in all of these points is the fact that Noah and Job were both not Israelites.
Oh,
you're right.
wait, remind us what they were, because Job,
Well,
yes,
so-
that makes sense. But Noah, I forgot about that. I guess
Yeah.
Israel wasn't really a thing then?
Exactly, yeah. So for
Okay,
Noah, we
yeah.
don't quite know where Noah was exactly, but he wasn't in Israel because it didn't exist yet.
Okay.
And then Job was not, Job was an example of someone who was not even a Jew, but who worshiped Yahweh. That's kind of
Okay.
the accepted thing there, is that Job was
Interesting.
not a Hebrew.
Huh.
And then it's like, well, Daniel's weird then to be in that grouping then. Like, why is he here?
Yeah.
And they're kind of, people who are defending that it's that Daniel are saying, well, it's because Daniel wasn't in Israel. He was in another land. So they're all 3 people sort of in lands that don't worship Yahweh who are worshiping Yahweh. And like, maybe that's what unites them.
Interesting.
And perhaps putting Daniel in the middle of the 3 is not, because if you're saying their chronological order, doesn't make sense. But if it's like he's in the middle because that's like the most important spot, maybe. So that's the arguments for it being that Daniel. Now, the next argument is that it's this character Danel, who would have been a cultural figure at the time, who is actually a Canaanite figure. And that the knowledge of him comes from basically writings that were discovered in like 1926. So not even that long ago, really, historically speaking here. And basically there's this story called The Tale of Akhat, which is Aqhat. I keep wanting to make the Q into an S and call him The Tale of Asshat.
No.
But the tale of Akat.
Cute.
So it tells the story of this man named Danel, who is childless and who offers sacrifices to his gods so that they would grant him a son. And Baal intercedes on Danel's behalf and talks to El, who was sort of the chief god in the Canaanite pantheon, and convinced him to give him a son who's called Akat. And then he kind of goes on to get this magical bow. And there's like other mythology, but basically saying maybe it's this character because he would have been someone known at that time. He fits more chronologically older, like Noah and Job. So maybe he makes more sense that then he would fit chronologically in between the time of like Noah, I guess, being more recent or less recent. I don't quite know. So that's the argument for him. The argument against him is that if you want to make the argument of like, yeah, look, these are all sort of wise men who are not Israelites. It's like, yeah, but he also didn't worship Yahweh. And in the context of Ezekiel, that doesn't make sense that we would be saying this guy's cool. Right? Right? If our whole thing is like idols and worship of other gods is so bad.
Yeah. It feels like that would sabotage your whole message.
Yeah. So I've come across a lot of people being like, I get why you might think it's that, but it's not. And they also point out that the spelling, they're like, just forget about it. Spelling in the Bible, as we've experienced with Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadrezzar, it's all over the place. It doesn't matter. It's like it's in the ballpark. That's all that actually matters here.
Right.
So then the last one, and this one is less widely known, but I did find an interesting research paper here on researchgate.net about identifying the Daniel character in Ezekiel. And this proposes there's actually a third Daniel who's been under our noses all along and that we've forgotten about.
What?
A third Daniel?
Who?
Yeah, check this out. So in First Chronicles, okay, so we haven't read Chronicles, but we've read the story of this. King David had sons, the second oldest of which was named Daniel.
Oh.
And then in other verses, they're saying like, well, but that doesn't make sense because then in 2 Samuel, it lists his sons. And in the second position is Chileab, which does sound familiar to me.
Really? I do not remember Chileab at all. It sounds delicious.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Please remind us.
And then basically there's kind of this argument saying that actually Daniel and Chileab are the same person. That's like a nickname or an alternate name or something.
Wait, what was he in? Sorry, remind us.
Who, what? In 2 Samuel?
2 Samuel, thank you. Yeah.
2 Samuel is where he's called Chileab. In First Chronicles, which we haven't read yet, is Daniel. King David's second son, Daniel. So then, if we all take a trip down memory lane to King David and all the S that went down with that, he had all these sons, but all of them kind of got disqualified from being king after him, right? And that was because his first son like rebelled against him, and his third son got killed. Absalom got killed, and then Adonijah led a rebellion that got killed by Bathsheba's people. So like something bad happened. But Daniel never gets mentioned as like a potential candidate. And Chileab too. Like they're never mentioned at all. And so potential explanations are one, maybe he already died. Another is that perhaps he was never even considered to be king because he was so into his Torah studies and that he was just such a devout wise man, and that's he kind of went off to, be a priest or whatever instead of being in line to be a king. So anyway, I thought this was pretty interesting that there's some hot debate and some decent options and also some problems with all the explanations all around.
Wow.
But, I mean, sounds like the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. It's so interesting that so many people are working to interpret this book, that it is still like a living, breathing thing in many ways. It's cool.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Speaking of that, we move on now to pillows and kerchiefs and sewing them on wrists and elbows and things like that. Yeah. And again, I mean, in a similar fashion, I think that a lot of people are not quite sure what to make of this passage. So just to recap, in Ezekiel 13:18, and this is from, I think, the NIV, Woe to the women that sew pillows to all armholes and make kerchiefs upon the head of every stature to hunt souls.
Now it's armholes.
Yeah,
Now it's
that's really good.
I know. This is armholes. In ours, it was like the elbows.
Right.
So, yeah, just, in make of that what she will.
Wow.
But this is interesting. And it even says here, the pillows sewed to the armholes or to the elbows. And this is from BibleTruthPublishers.com.
Okay.
So this is their words, not mine. It says, the pillows sewed to the armholes or to the elbows, as the margin has it, are usually supposed to mean the soft cushions which are placed on oriental divans. Divans?
Divans, like chairs, like sitting things?
Maybe. I mean, I'm even thinking of perhaps just to sit upon these like pretty nice cushions, or to put, your elbows upon these nice cushions in order to have something there for you to place yourself, I guess. And this says, among the poorer classes, the skins of sheep or of goats were formerly used for pillows, being stuffed with chaff or wool for this purpose. But the pillows of the wealthy were, of course, more luxurious in style and finish. And they were some soft substance covered with rich and costly materials. So that's an interesting thing.
Is it
to
about
think
them
of.
like lounging about?
Yeah, perhaps.
With their kerchiefs and pillows under their elbows?
This sounds like a stretch to me, personally.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's what this person is saying. And, these commentators are supposed to mean that God stretched forth his hand to punish sin. The false prophets covered them by their heterodox teaching so that his hands would not seem to be able to grasp the rebellious offenders. Perhaps that's why they were like on the joints of the wrists or something there. They can't grasp with these pillows here.
All this is a stretch.
Yeah.
Not that I claim that we're the final authority on any of this, but
So, okay, that was one thing. And then also on BibleHub.com, they have this cool thing where they do a bunch of different commentaries for each specific passage in the Bible. Yeah, each verse. And so they have a lot of things on here. Yeah, they say like pillows to all armholes. It says bands to all joints of the hand, because some of the things talk about like wrists or hands or something, as opposed to.
We talked about like magic charm bracelets or something, right?
Yeah, they talked about that. So again, I mean, just these like things in which to maybe seduce or put your elbows thus forth, so that you are in this sort of lounging state. So they're talking about against the false prophetess, because they specifically mentioned women in this passage.
Yeah.
And so it says, as the Lord had not endowed men only with the gifts of prophecy, but sometimes women also. For example, Miriam, Deborah, and Huldah. So women rose up along with the false prophets and prophesied out of their own hearts without being impelled by the Spirit of God. So they're specifically talking, I think, in this passage about these women who were these false prophets also, essentially. And speaking about them specifically.
Okay. I guess that makes some sense in context, because he was talking to them about they were also sort of giving messages of there's going to be peace and everything's going to be fine. So yeah.
And the kerchiefs.
Their prophesying has to do with kerchiefs and pillows.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the kerchiefs are like specifically about them. So these triumphal hats or caps or veils were made by these prophetesses, and they were put upon the head of everyone who consulted them. And so,
it's like
says
your swag for visiting the prophetess.
I guess maybe
for buying from my Etsy shop, for buying an elbow pillow, you get one free kerchief with every purchase.
One free kerchief / veil. Yeah. It says, by these habits, the deceived inquirer was either persuaded, he was made to fit to receive the oracle. He was, there to interpret a sign or promise victory over Babylonia. Stuff like that. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. So a lot of things talk about this specifically, but I think overall, as many of these interpretations are, they're kind of potentially grasping at straws / trying to figure out exactly what's going on here. And as you said, it might be a little bit of a stretch. And the souls part, I mean, it's just like the person's life, estate, and to all to enrich or maintain themselves. So, yeah, souls or souls within, an embodied human, or perhaps souls outside of a human after they're dead.
Yeah, or maybe just taking their souls away from worshiping Yahweh rather than them
Yep.
getting
It's a good point.
power or currency to level up in Dark Souls with them.
There you go.
It's
Yeah, ensnare these souls, seek to destroy peace and comfort, things like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot there. I know it's probably, it's a lot of people making accusations against these women and these elbow pillows.
They were just trying to run an Etsy business. Come on.
Yeah.
They were. It's true. That's all that they were doing, really. Alrighty.
Well,
what do you have, Dedeker?
Do you want to hear about old architecture? One of my favorites.
Always. Yeah,
is it going to be waterways?
Waterways, exactly. I was
No.
like, waterways and old architecture. Give it to us.
It's going to be about waddling, waddle and daubing.
Okay.
You heard of that?
Wow.
The good old waddle and daub.
No.
I mean, that definitely needs to be a dance that we make.
Yeah. Along with the daub and slap, the waddle and daub. Yes.
Waddle and daub. I'm picturing it right now.
Yeah.
I'm imagining kind of like, watch me whip, watch me nay. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be that kind of a song
Watch
where
me
you're kind of
daub,
just saying,
daub, watch me waddle. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Watch me
Yeah.
waddle,
Yeah.
watch me dub
Uh-huh.
and slap.
Great.
That kind of thing.
Okay.
Wow.
It's a jam.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I went
Cool.
down this rabbit hole because of looking up whitewashing, like the literal painting technique
Right.
of whitewashing.
Okay.
But before I can describe whitewashing, I have to go back to waddle and daubing, naturally, as
Okay.
everyone knows.
Okay.
Everyone knows.
Well,
Okay.
Did you have a question, Jace?
it's just, okay, I don't even know what whitewashing, like, how is it different from painting? Because my only experience ever with the term whitewashing, as far as like painting something or making it white, was from the Tom Sawyer video game for the Apple IIe,
Whoa.
which was like a
What?
text-based
What?
adventure game, kind of like the old King's Quest games, where you're kind of like moving a character around, but you have to like type to do stuff.
Right,
There
like
was
there's
this
a
Tom
parser.
Sawyer game, and they were whitewashing a fence at the beginning, and I didn't understand quite what that meant, except I saw the picture that looked like painting a fence, and I've never known anything more than that. So
Okay, so that's
please tell me.
the whitewashing is your cultural touch point.
Yes.
Or Tom Sawyer is
This
your cultural
old,
touch point to whitewashing.
floppy disk PC game. Yes.
How funny. That's really interesting. Well, we will get to that a little bit, I suppose. But I'm bringing it back to waddle and daub is a building method that's been used for many, many, many thousands of years by human beings. It goes all the way back to like Neolithic. And it's essentially the process of, I'm going to take some sticks or some straw maybe and some reeds and weave them together.
Okay.
And then I'm going to take a mixture of mud, clay, poop, straw, and mix that all together and kind of like slap that on to the woven structure. And that's what I'm going to build my house out of.
Okay.
So kind of this idea of the weaving, the woven reeds or wood or sticks or whatever it is underneath provides our skeleton, our frame to put this mud, clayish mixture on, which is going to dry and harden.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
I see. So you kind of make the scaffolding out of this other stuff, and then you kind of like drywall it with this.
Yeah.
This
Kind of like
mixture
a
of
very, very
stuff.
early
Okay.
drywall,
Okay.
I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe plaster would be a better analogy.
Yeah. So this technique goes back at least 6,000 years.
Wow.
There's still many parts of the world that use this particular construction technique. And it's also coming full circle where developed areas are wanting to use this again because it's now a more sustainable building technique. It's a
Right,
sustainable
right.
building material.
Huh.
Now, what might be the problems, though, with a good old wattle and daub house? If your house is made out of like mud and sticks,
Yeah.
what's going to happen?
A
Big bad wolf.
bad wolf.
big bad
Yes.
wolf, yeah.
Definitely. Obviously. Yeah.
For sure.
Now, I'm sorry. Just to clarify real quick, so the waddle is the sticks and reeds, and
Yes.
the daub is the plaster.
Is the mud and poop. Yes.
Okay, it's the waddle and
Yes.
daub. Okay,
The
got it.
waddle and daub. Yes.
Okay.
You got it. But what's the problem with that other than big bad wolves coming to blow it
Yeah.
down?
It burns down. It's flammable.
It's, flammable. Probably not as flammable as just a straight up house of sticks, but
Mud and sticks. I mean, what
suppose,
about
yeah.
rain and water?
oh yeah. Rain, erosion.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
for sure.
Yeah.
Now, this is where whitewash comes in. So, whitewash is made out of lime or calcium carbonate as well, or like
Huh.
chalk, essentially.
Okay.
And there's a process by which, as we go through history, I'm so sorry, historians out there listening. This is going to be me just really simplifying the history. Don't at me, please. Of first, we're just kind of taking this like chalk calcium carbonate and mixing it with water and then using that, slapping that on the outside of our wattle and daub to make it look nice initially, to kind of clean it up.
Wattle and daub.
Okay,
It
yeah. Make
has
it so it doesn't look all like poop. It looks like
doesn't
white,
look like poop.
nice
It looks like
chalk.
white and it's nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
It does come like the lime comes with some natural antibacterial properties as well.
Okay.
And so sometimes we find it being used on the interiors as well, like particularly with dairies as we're moving further into the future, again, because it's slightly antibacterial. But anyway, we develop processes where first, like we bake the lime in a kiln and then we mix it into water and then it goes through a different chemical process. We've been experimenting with this lime thing for quite a while. I will
This
say.
lime thing, amazing.
This whole whitewashing thing.
This is lime like limestone and not like
Yes.
put the lime
not
in
like
the
a delicious, not like a lime and a
Okay.
coconut. No, like
Okay,
limestone. Yes.
got it.
Yes. And so if you think about like what would we call it? Like a Tudor style cottage, where how it's usually like a series of squares of like geometric shapes. That's based on like the wattling, so we'd weave it into this square. And then we have to put it in this frame that supports it. And then we put on the daubing and then we paint it white on the outside.
Okay.
I see. So we've also got a house frame. Okay, that makes more sense because I wasn't sure how
Yes.
this was going to stay up. Okay, so you've kind of filled in between your frame with the wattling and then your daubing.
Yes.
Frame, wattle, daub. Got it.
And then we whitewash it.
And then whitewash. Okay.
Now, here's the problem is just mixing the lime with the water and then painting that on. It's still not great because you touch it and it like rubs off in your clothing. Over time, the rain also washes that away as well. And so,
Yikes.
yes. And so then we start mixing in animal fat. And what the animal fat does is it makes it a waterproof coating for your building.
Yuck.
That helps protect that mud and sticks and straw from being just battered by the rain and eventually eroding over time.
Okay.
Yes.
Emily's so upset.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
What other option did they have, Emily?
I don't know, Dedeker. I mean, I guess like factory farming wasn't a thing back then. So
that's true too.
Factory farming wasn't a thing. And it's also better than just taking this animal fat and I'm going to throw it in the garbage and do nothing with it.
No, I mean, I hear you. It was a very different thing back then because people were, just existing on this plane with other animals. They were animals fighting against other animals. And, it was very different than now where we are these supreme beings that are choosing to annihilate another race of animals.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
Species, rather. Yes.
Yes. Also, as we clarified in this chapter, sometimes the animals take back over.
That's true.
Like Yahweh was saying.
You know
He's
what?
like,
that's true.
And that's fine.
Animals are going to come chase y'all out.
It's fine, by all means. Indeed. But fascinating.
Now,
wow.
Again, whitewashing has been a thing that's happened for so long. And another interesting thing to think about, and again, this is fast forwarding way beyond where we're at in history, in the book of Ezekiel. But most medieval castles would have been whitewashed as well. And sometimes even also plastered and then whitewashed. So as in a lot of the medieval castles that we see with the bare stone, that's not how it would have actually looked.
Wouldn't have been bare stone. Whoa.
During the day or in the time that it was. Because whitewashing became to be like a symbol of wealth. If you could afford to whitewash your entire castle.
That makes sense.
You're probably doing okay.
Yeah, because you had to ship in all this limestone and hire people. Oh, boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the limestone, get people on, all that stuff.
It's amazing. Like all this wealth, like choosing to show off all this wealth was even a thing back then.
Oh, yeah. That was old as dirt.
Yeah, some things are universal.
They even talked about it in the pillows,
Yeah.
Right.
Old as dirt.
Pillow time. Yeah.
But there's also, and again, this is now just going down the rabbit hole of just fun trivia, that some medieval castles were also plastered on the outside because that would help with insulation, that would help with temperature control, that would help with moisture control to a certain extent. Like the plaster would serve as something that would slowly absorb rain rather than the rain being dumped directly on your bricks or stone and mortar. And so that also helps protect the castle. So it's kind of like the thing that we run into with Greek and Roman statues, where in our minds we think of them as like this beautiful, white, perfect, but in the reality they were probably painted and very colorful. And it's just now we only see them after the paint is worn off. And so we assume that's how they must have looked back in the day. And it's the same with a lot of medieval castles. Not every medieval castle or home, but often they probably didn't look like the traditional like stony fortress that we're used to seeing. It may have been a much more smooth exterior.
Wow.
And very white also.
Wow. Whitewashing.
Blindingly white castles.
And now you
Gosh.
know.
What an academic episode this was.
Right?
Did.
Right?
Yeah. The more you know. It's beautiful. Wow.
Oh, okay. And then to bring it back to Tom Sawyer. How can I bring it back to Tom Sawyer?
Oh, I don't know.
Basically, it is this funny thing where I think for much of history, whitewashing is seen as a little bit of a luxurious thing, the fact that you can afford to do it. But then by the time we get to the colonial era, particularly in the States, whitewashing is seen as only a poor person thing. Because by that point, we have better paints for exteriors of houses that don't wash away, that don't rub off, that harden and stay there. And so whitewashing was seen as something that you could cook up at home because you're poor.
I see. You just rub together some chalk and some poop,
Right.
and you or wait, no, sorry, the poop's on the
I
inside.
don't know. Yeah.
Some chalk and some whatever other liquids, and then you just kind of do it.
Uh-huh.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, so
Right.
wow. So a thing that was this sign of wealth at one time, by Tom Sawyer's time, was more identifying. Like, look, he's poor and lives with poor people and does poor things.
And they can only afford whitewash instead
Right.
of paint.
Wow. This is wild. And of course, now I just Googled it and I'm seeing all sorts of guides on like bobvila.com about how to whitewash your fence. So it's come back around to being a fancy.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, now it has come back around to being part of this whole shabby chic
Yep.
thing.
Exactly. Gosh.
Yeah, of course.
What a world.
Wow. Indeed. Beautiful. Well, thanks, everyone. As always, this is a fun time getting to learn more about what the heck is going on in this here Bible, because really, we don't know. We don't know any better than you do. We're just trying to ascertain what's occurring here. So thanks for going on this journey with us, and we will see you next week for even more Ezekiel.